Okay, today we're going to talk about the excretory systems. So an excretory system is any system in your body that removes harmful substances from it in some way or form. So there's a bunch of excretory systems in your body. I'm going to touch on 3 of them. So the first one is your lungs. Your lungs remove carbon dioxide and other harmful gases from your blood. That's what your lungs do. So that makes it an excretory organ. And this has come up in questions in exams before about the lungs. So yeah. Then the next excretory organ system that we get is your sweat glands. So your sweat glands filter out some of the harmful substances from your blood and then excrete it as sweat out of your body. So there's a little sweat droplet forming. This is your sweat gland. So as we've got tiny little capillary arteries going all the way through your skin down here, this little duct over there absorbs the water and some of the harmful substances from the blood going through, and then it will then conduct this water up through the little pipe out onto your skin. You can also get these little sweat glands next to hairs, and then it gets excreted next to the hair like that. Okay, so the next kind of excretory system, your main excretory system, is your liver and your kidneys. So your liver takes harmful substances from your blood and then it turns them into other substances that don't harm your body. So it would then take these new substances that it made and it would put it back in your blood for your kidneys to filter out later. So here we've got an example. So ammonia is NH4 and carbon dioxide is CO2. You guys don't need to know these symbols. I'm writing them down so that you guys can see what's happening. And then it makes urea, which is NH2, 2 of those, CO, water, which is H2O, and hydrogen gas. The hydrogen gas gets taken out through your lungs. The water and the urea sits around in your blood for a while and then gets filtered out with your kidneys. This process of taking ammonia is a byproduct of making proteins to build your cells with, is actually a very complicated process that takes place in the liver. So I'm not going to go into much detail about how this works. So in us humans, we make urea with water and hydrogen as byproducts from our carbon dioxide cycle here. In certain kinds of reptiles and birds, instead of making urea, which uses lots of water to make, it instead makes uric acid, which is, if you've ever looked at bird poop, the thickish white goop inside bird poop, that is the uric acid. Okay. So your liver takes the harmful substances like ammonia, which can actually poison you, turns it into less harmful substances that can then sit around in your blood for a while, and then it goes through your kidneys later. You can see here, your liver has 2 big blood vessels going past it, and it would filter out it would convert these things into different substances, and then it would pass them back into the blood. So then we get to your kidneys. Your kidneys also have big blood vessels called the renal arteries and renal veins. And when it gets to your kidneys filter out about 20% of the water from your blood. And it takes pretty much all of the salts and chemicals from your blood that goes through it. And then it would go through these salts and things, and it would put the ones that your body actually needs back. So it takes all of them out, and then it puts about 99% of them back into your blood, because those are the salts and the chemicals and things that your body actually needs to function. So puts most of them back. So the greatest part of the kidney isn't actually the taking out of the blood part, it's the putting back into the blood what needs to be put back in part. So it puts back all of the salts, the chemicals, and the water that your body actually needs. It keeps a very tiny amount of water back, and then adds in all of the chemicals that it is keeping out of your blood. So that would be things like urea, that would be other kinds of chemicals and stuff. And it would put it into your into this water liquid, making urine, which then passes down these ducts to your bladder. So we've got these little tubes called ureters, and they go down to your bladder. And then when it's time for you to go to the bathroom, all of this urine gets passed through your urethra and out into the world. Fantastic. Okay, so that was a remarkably quick overview about how our whole excretory systems work. So our pee is made up of pretty much a lot of water, some urea, which is this chemical here, and a bunch of other chemicals and things that our body doesn't need. So there could be some salts in it. There could be some sugar. If there's too much sugar in your blood, it gets passed out through your kidneys into your urine, and all sorts of things like that. So anything that your body doesn't need, it passes out through your kidneys into your urine. The actual name of someone being diabetic, that diabetes, that word actually means sweet pea, because way back medieval times, when doctors did not have such nice equipment and things, they tested urine by literally tasting it, which, yeah, I am so glad we've got chemical equipment that can test urine now. But it was called diabetes because literally the pea would be sweet, because all of the sugars and things in the blood wasn't actually being passed into the cells where it can be used. It was just passed out of the body through the kidneys into the urine, which is not great. In general, your urine isn't too bad for you to drink. You don't want to do it though. It is not very healthy in terms of germs. Your urine has a lot of bits and bobs of things that your body has fought off. So if your white blood cells actually encounter some kind of bacteria or virus in your body and it disintegrates them, that then gets passed out through your kidneys into your urine. So you're essentially reabsorbing some of these pathogens that you don't want. So you tend to not want to do that. However, your urine is mostly made up of water. And in that sense, it could be fairly okay if you are in some kind of life or death situation. But again, not recommended. So yeah, I am going to show you guys a video now about what the inside of your kidney looks like and how the inside of your kidney works. Please note, you guys don't need to know how the inside of a kidney looks and how the inside of a kidney works. It is just there purely for more information and so that you guys understand how this whole process comes together. So what I've gone through with you guys up to now, that's all you guys need to know about the excretory system. So here we go. Need to go to
One of the coolest and most...
Apologies. Here we go. Okay. So let me just share computer sound. So this is a video from Crash Course, and this is from their Crash Course Biology. And please let me know if you guys can't see this.
Most important things that our bodies do is maintain this thing called homeostasis. It's a regulation of the stable internal environment no matter where we are or what we're doing. After all, we put our body through a lot every single day. We're always adding food and liquid and chemicals, and we're constantly changing temperature and our levels of activities, but our bodies can roll with it. It's like no big deal for them. All of our organ systems have some hand in maintaining homeostasis. I mean, it's basically the thing that makes us not dead. But the excretory system, aka the urinary system, which includes the kidneys, the ureters, the bladder, and the urethra, is the star quarterback of the homeostasis team. That's because your excretory system is responsible for maintaining the right levels of water and dissolved substances in your body. This is called osmoregulation, and it's how our bodies get rid of the stuff we don't need, like the byproducts of metabolizing food, while also making sure that we don't get dehydrated. It's the body's greatest balancing act, and your body is doing it right now and all of the time, as long as you're not dead. As with other organ systems we've talked about, not all excretory systems in the animal kingdom are created equal. Different animals excrete wastes different ways based on their evolutionary history, what environments they live in, and what their hobbies and interests are. These factors all influence how an animal regulates water, and most metabolic waste needs to be dissolved in water in order to be excreted. The problem is, a main byproduct of metabolizing food is ammonia, which comes from breaking down proteins, and it's pretty toxic. So depending on how much water is available to an animal and how easy it is for the animal to lug a bunch of water around inside it, animals convert this ammonia into either urea or uric acid. Mammals like us, as well as amphibians and some marine animals like sharks and sea turtles, convert ammonia into urea, a compound made from combining ammonia and carbon dioxide in their livers. The advantage of urea is its very low toxicity. It can hang out in your circulatory systems for a while with no ill effects, but you have to have some extra water available to dissolve it and get rid of it. This isn't such a tall order, really. I mean, peeing isn't a huge inconvenience. I mean, is it? It's not for me, anyway. Well, it would be, though, if you were a bird or an insect or a lizard living in the desert. Animals that have to be light enough to fly or don't have a bunch of spare water hanging around convert ammonia into uric acid, which can be excreted as kind of paste, so not a lot of water is needed. You've seen bird poop. If you haven't taken a close look, next time, do that. Just look. The white stuff in the bird droppings is actually the uric acid-y pee, and the brown stuff is the poop. So now that we've established what is and what is not bird poop, let's get down to the brass tacks of how humans get all of this urea out of our blood and into our toilets. The excretory system starts with the kidneys, the organs that do all the heavy lifting, from maintaining those levels of water and dissolved materials in our bodies to controlling our blood pressure. And even though they do an amazing job, I'm not bad-mouthing your kidneys here. The way that they do it is frankly a little bit janky and inefficient. To start out by filtering a bunch of fluid and the stuff dissolved in the fluid out of your blood, and then they basically reabsorb 99% of it back before sending that 1% on its way in the form of urine. Seriously, 99% gets reabsorbed. On an average day, your kidneys filter out about 180 liters of fluid from your blood, but only 1.5 liters of that ends up getting peed out. So most of your excretory system isn't dedicated to excreting, it's dedicated to reabsorbing. But the system works. Obviously, I'm still alive, so we can't argue with that. And now it is time to get into the nitty-gritty details of how your kidneys do all this, and it's pretty cool. But there's lots of weird words, so get ready. Your kidneys do all this work using a network of tiny filtering structures called nephrons. Each one of your mango-sized kidneys has about 1 million of them. If you were, don't do this, but if you were to unravel all of your nephrons and put them end to end, they would stretch over 80 kilometers. This is where all the crazy action happens. So to understand how they work, we're just gonna follow the flow from your heart to the toilet. Blood from the heart enters the kidneys through renal arteries, and just so you know, whenever you hear the word renal, it means we're dealing with kidney stuff. As the blood enters, it's forced into a system of tiny capillaries until it enters a tangle of porous capillaries called the glomerulus. This is the starting point for a single nephron. The pressure in the glomerulus is high enough that it squeezes some of the fluid out of the blood, about 20% of it, and into a cup-like sac called the Bowman's capsule. The stuff that gets squeezed out is no longer blood. It is now called filtrate. It's made up of water, urea, some smaller ions and molecules like sodium, glucose, and amino acids. The bigger stuff in your blood, like the red blood cells and the larger proteins, they don't get filtered. Now the filtrate is ready to be processed. From the Bowman's capsule, it flows into a twisted tube called the proximal convoluted tubule, which means the tube near the beginning, and that is all windy. Why are we so bad at naming things? Anyway, this is the first of 2 convoluted tubules in the nephron, and these, along with other tubules we're talking about, are where the osmoregulation takes place. With all kinds of tricked out specialized pumps and other kinds of active and passive transport, they reabsorb water and dissolve materials to create whatever balance your body needs at the time. In the proximal tubule, it's mainly organic solutes in the filtrate that are reabsorbed, like glucose and amino acids and other important stuff that you want to hang on to. But it also helps to recapture some sodium and potassium and water that we're going to want later. From here, the filtrate enters the loop of Henle, which is a long hairpin-shaped tubule that passes through the 2 main layers of the kidney. The outermost layer is the renal cortex. That's where the glomerulus and the Bowman's capsule and both convoluted tubules are. And the layer beneath that is the renal medulla, which is the center of the kidney. Cortex, by the way, is Latin for tree bark, so whenever you see it in biology, you know that it's the outside of something. Medulla, on the other hand, meaning marrow or pith, so you know that it's the inside, just to help you remember this stuff. But before we take a tour of this amazing loop, I have to do a couple of things. First, go pee, because this is, you know. And second, a biography, so I'll be right back. The loop of Henle was discovered by 19th century German physician and anatomist Friedrich Gustav Jacob Henle. And I'm pretty sure he was just one of those guys that you can't gross out because he spent most of his career dissecting kidneys and eyeballs and brains, and also seemed to be a huge fan of mucus and pus. He was, by far, the most important anatomist of his time. His 3-volume Handbook of Systematic Human Anatomy was recognized as the definitive anatomy textbook of its day, and was famous for its exquisite attention to detail and its intricate, even beautiful illustrations. Not only did Henle discover the loop of Henle, arguably the linchpin of kidney function in mammals, he was also an early adopter of the wildly unpopular germ theory of disease. His student Robert Koch is considered to be one of the founders of microbiology, and the two worked together to formulate the Henle-Koch postulates, which today remain the 4 conditions that must be met to establish a causal relationship between a microbe and a disease. Henle taught the world so much about the human body that there are right now, in you, no fewer than 9 features that bear his name. From the Henle's fissures between the muscle fibers of your heart, to the crypts of Henle, which are microscopic pockets in the whites of your eyes, also the name of my Cradle of Filth cover band. Alright, so review time. We've squeezed some filtrate out of the blood and reabsorbed some of the important organic molecules we want to keep. But most of the reabsorption action happens here in the loop of Henle, which does 3 really important things. 1, it extracts most of the water that we need from the filtrate as it travels down to the medulla. 2, it pumps out the salts that we want to keep on the way back up to the cortex. And 3, in the process of doing all that, it makes the medulla hypertonic or super salty relative to the filtrate, creating a concentration gradient that will allow the medulla to draw out even more water one last time from the filtrate before the final journey to the toilet begins. It's complicated and, again, kinda janky, but it's what allows us mammals to create urine that's as concentrated as necessary, using only the amount of water that our bodies can spare at the time. So first, filtrate starts going down the loop, and the thing to know here is that the membrane is highly permeable to water. Not so much to salt or anything else, mainly water. Now, compared to the filtrate, the tissue of the medulla is already pretty salty, and as the filtrate processes, the surrounding tissue becomes increasingly hypertonic. The farther down you go, the saltier it gets. So applying everything that we've learned about osmosis, you know that as the filtrate moves along, it loses more and more water through the membrane. By the time the filtrate gets to the bottom of the loop, it's highly concentrated. And now the filtrate enters the ascending end of the loop, and here it's basically the same but in reverse. The membrane is not permeable to water, and instead it's lined with channels that transport ions like sodium, potassium, and chlorine. And because the filtrate is so concentrated now, it's actually hypertonic compared to the fluid outside in the medulla. So as it ascends, huge amounts of salts start flowing out of the filtrate, which makes the renal medulla really salty. This salty medulla also creates a concentration gradient between the medulla and the filtrate, which we're gonna need in the final step of pee making. But first, once the filtrate is back up in the cortex and out of the loop, it enters the second of our convoluted tubules, called the distal convoluted tubule, or farther away curly tube. While the first tubule worked mostly in the reabsorbing of organic compounds in the filtrate, here the focus is on regulating levels of potassium, sodium, and calcium. This work is mainly done by pumps and hormones that regulate the reabsorption process. By the time it's done, we have finally taken everything we want to keep out of the filtrate. So now it's mainly just just excess water, urea, and other metabolic waste. This stuff all gets dumped into collecting ducts that channel it back down to the center of the kidney, the medulla. And remember, the medulla is super salty, right? Now, more hormones kick in that tell the collecting ducts how porous to make their membranes. If the membranes are made very porous, more water is absorbed into the medulla, which makes the urine, yes, we can start calling it urine now, even more concentrated. And here's a fun fact. If you've ever had one drink too many, you might have noticed that you start to pee a lot, and your pee is clear. That's because alcohol interferes with these hormones, especially one called antidiuretic hormone, which tells the collecting ducts to be very porous so that you reabsorb most of the water. With those hormones all confused and out of commission, you just start peeing out all kinds of water, which also means you're getting dehydrated, which means you're officially on a one-way trip to Hangover City. So now you know why that happens. Now at this point, the urine leaves both kidneys and flows down to the urinary bladder by tubes called ureters. Once in the bladder, the urine just sits around waiting for us to decide when it's time to find a bathroom. And when that time comes, a little sphincter muscle relaxes and releases the urine from the bladder into a tube called the urethra, which empties out wherever you point it. So that's how your excretory system works, and that's basically how it works for most mammals, although some modifications are made based on, again, where they live and what they do. For instance, kangaroo rats, which are tiny and adorable and live in the desert, have the most concentrated urine of any animal anywhere because it can't spare the water. So it has a very, very long loop of Henle that reabsorbs most of the water from the filtrate. On the other end of the spectrum, we have the beavers, who have very short loops of Henle because they're like water reabsorption, schmotter reabsorption. Do you see what I do all day? And so now you know the true origins of pee. Thank you for coming to learn with us here.
Okay. So again, guys, you don't need to know everything that was in that video. It is there to explain things a little more for you guys so that it makes more sense. So here we go. So I want to get back to the different excretory systems in your body. All of these excretory systems help you to get different kinds of chemicals and things out of your body. So your lungs can help you get any kind of gases out of your body. And this is often a reason why your breath smells bad. If you have some kind of something in your body that needs to come out, it often comes out through your lungs into your breath. So if your breath smells bad and it's not because you just brushed your teeth and everything is fine in your mouth, it's probably because you've got some kind of toxin or anything in your body that now needs to come out, and so it's coming out through the air that you breathe out. Similarly to your sweat glands, yes, exactly, like coffee. Coffee you can very definitely smell on someone's breath. In your sweat glands, quite a lot of different substances can also come out. This is why your sweat is very often slightly smelly. So yeah. And then over here with our liver and kidneys, if you guys have ever eaten some asparagus, you will know that your urine smells fairly bad after you've eaten asparagus. That's because asparagus actually has a chemical compound in it that your body doesn't really like. So it filters it out through your kidneys. And so you end up with slightly fairly smelly urine. So yeah. You can literally see all sorts of different things and what is happening inside the body based upon the things that your body is trying to get rid of. If you end up with some kind of illness or sickness, very often you end up with some of these systems working slightly overtime. If you have a fever, then you've got lots of bacteria in your body and your body is trying to get rid of it. So it's trying to literally get rid of all of the different bits and bobs of bacteria stuck in your body. So if you are in a fever, you tend to sweat a lot, and that is to get all of these bad things out of your body as quickly as possible. So yeah, if you've ever had something like a bladder infection or a urinary tract infection or something like that, you would notice that you tend to pee a lot more, and it slightly hurts when you pee because of the infection. but that peeing a lot more is literally your body going, oh, there's something wrong. We should try and get all of this bad stuff out as quickly as possible. So yeah. Morning breath, on the other hand, is not actually caused by your lungs. That is caused by your mouth. If you if you sleep with your mouth closed, then your mouth stays nice and moist, and then you don't end up with essentially bad breath in the mornings. If, however, you sleep with your mouth open, then you've got lots of air traveling over your mouth the whole time, and the water in your mouth sort of dries out a bit. So you end up with a slightly more concentrated solution of stuff in your mouth, and that is essentially what gives you morning breath. So not very great. Brush your teeth. Okay, let's see if there's any other questions. Okay, yeah, garlic actually gets excreted both from your lungs and by your sweat. You can smell if someone has eaten a lot of garlic. Slightly, yeah, not great.